160 every 20 millisecond, a packet of 160 bytes is generated for voice. Now you can also think of a video application along with it. Video has a slightly different requirement. Video, the payload size is not fixed like this because a video codec typically has two kind of frames. It has this P frames and this I frames. So these P frames are roughly the predicted frames, which are inferred from the I frames. P frames are shorter because they don't need to carry that much new information. They are 8 kilobytes, still much bigger than audio signals. And iframes are much larger. They can be 64 kilobytes. And you can imagine they are generated every 50 milliseconds. This is the rate at which data is being generated. So these numbers are roughly for a video which is 20 frames per second. Okay. So now this is the overall rate at which data is generated. But typically, when we translate this requirement into a requirement to be fulfilled, we want to provide packets, IP packets, which are 1500 bytes and which is too big. At a low level, you can't have a packet of this size. So what we do is we further break it down into several small packets. Let's say 7 packets of small, about 200 bytes. So similar to the VoIP voice payload. Okay, 160 byte. So this is also broken into such packets, but the perceived delay will be for the end-to-end larger 1500 byte packet. So such this VoIP kind of applications, and if you add video also to it, roughly the QoS requirement is that you should be able to guarantee delivery within 150 millisecond and with less than 30 millisecond jitter for audio. So this jitter means the variability roughly around 150 millisecond. So this was just an example where 150 millisecond delay is what you're looking for. And since I'm able to communicate to you, you perhaps can imagine that maybe we can support something close to 150 millisecond delay already. Okay, so let me do some calculation for a slightly different application where you want to drive a vehicle at 36 km per hour. Okay, over a wireless network. And you want to do this by looking at a video stream coming in from the vehicle. By the way, this will be a very simple talk. It's just to understand some ideas. So please ask questions. Okay, so you want to do this using a video stream coming from the vehicle. And the question we want to understand is what is the latency requirement for a network that wants to enable this. Let's suppose you look at one particular part of it. We want to enable braking. Okay, so human reaction time for braking is, so you imagine a remote driver sitting in a room, and this guy will apply a brake, and that brake will be executed on the vehicle, which is remote and is connected to this human operator through a wireless link. The reaction time for a human operator who sees some obstacle in front of the vehicle over a screen is 1 to 2 seconds. So at 36 km per hour, this results in an uncontrolled behavior of about 15 meters. Okay, and we can imagine a dry flat road. And for this, braking distance is roughly assumed to be 9 meters. These are actually standardized. So you can imagine that there's another 9 meters of braking distance that is allowed. So human will apply, by the time a human will apply a brake, vehicle would have moved 15 meters. And then another 9 meters it will move even after applying brakes. So that's 24 meters. That is allowed movement. And suppose we allow this to increase by 10% due to network delays. So you allow an extra 3 meter increase. Okay, this gives you a delay budget of 300 milliseconds for this application. Okay, so we have an end-to-end delay budget of 300 milliseconds. Now, how will this 300 milliseconds be consumed? First part is that the video sampling and processing delays is already 50 milliseconds. Just a very simple thing. If you have video stream at 30 frames per second, then anyway 30 milliseconds is a delay between 2 frames. So this 50 milliseconds is written off right away. Okay, and then over that, there's an additional transmission delay for video. Last slide, we saw that 150 millisecond is roughly what an application, what a standard like VoIP or some video streaming will be looking for. So let's say another 150 millisecond gone before you get the video signal. So you are left with, from your budget of 300 millisecond, you're left with 100 millisecond to send the brake signal. But this braking signal is a very small payload. You can imagine it's just a 2 bytes packet that you will send, and you want to send it within 100 milliseconds. However, you want to send it with guaranteed delivery, not a best effort delivery. If your video is not received within that 150 millisecond, that's fine. You can buffer, you can do something with it. But here, if the brake signal is not sent within this 100 millisecond, it can have much severe consequences. So this is slightly different application where, let's say, a latency requirement 100 millisecond is enough for a very short packet. Okay. Of course, if you increase the speed of the vehicle, this latency requirement will go down drastically. And suppose there is some more processing that you do at one end or the other, and that causes delay, then again this latency requirement will become more severe, may come down to 50 millisecond sometimes. Okay, but it's still not very drastic. It's still 50 to 100 millisecond. Okay, so these are what two applications that one can keep in mind when seeing what can be enabled by an LTE system for low latency. So one question we can consider is if these particular QoS quality of service requirements or delay requirements can be enabled by an LTE system. So LTE addresses a lot of low latency applications. So this is from the LTE standards. I'll summarize some LTE low latency application. One of the hidden goal of this talk is to bring out the LTE terminology and see what are the components of an LTE system. So at a high level, the quality of service requirements in LTE come in form of what are called bearer specification. So if you want to simplify things to a great extent, you can just imagine that this pipe which LTE enables, that pipe is what we can call a bearer, and this bearer has a quality of service guarantee. It has a guaranteed delay, it has a guaranteed rate. Okay, so it comes in form of these bearers. When you switch on your phone and when you connect to your service provider, you get what is called the default bearer. Okay, that's what you use to connect. That's the kind of pipe that you get. It's a non-GBR bearer. Basically, it means there's no guaranteed bit rate. It's just a pipe which does some kind of best effort transmission. And since it's a well-engineered system, you believe that things will be fine. Although things are not always fine. We all experience various problems with our calls, right? So it's a default bearer. It doesn't give any QoS guarantee. But along with this, more later releases of LTE standard have more advanced bearers with better guarantees. So one of them is voice over LTE and another one is video over LTE. This voice over LTE actually both Airtel and Jio, this I picked up from the website, claim to provide. Okay, and in fact Airtel enabled it just 6 months back and called it that and said that they have entered 5G, but it is actually an LTE bearer. And Jio also provide VoLTE, but it's not. I don't think it's very well implemented because I don't see any high quality of service when I'm connecting from my Airtel phone. But they claim to provide this. Okay, so this VoLTE is something which probably you have seen, voice over LTE bearer. It's a QoS guarantee bearer. It's not like this default bearer. I'll provide a list of different bearers which LTE has. There are other parts of the LTE standard which talk about low latency applications. One part which is of interest to us is this cellular V2X, vehicle to X communication. So this V2X, you can think of it as equal to V2V, vehicle to vehicle, and V2I. Okay, together we call it just V2X. X can be vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to infrastructure. So cellular V2X is a part of the LTE standard, which also has several low latency requirements. I'll present something here. Okay, so here is a list of top 10, let's say, bearers which LTE standard has. Although I don't think there are many implementations of all these bearers. Okay, the default bearer is something which you get when you connect, and these bearers have these numbers assigned to them. They have this priority wise numbers also assigned to them. So for instance, you can see this bearer number 2, which is the VoIP bearer, VoLTE bearer. It allows for a packet delay of 100 millisecond and allows for a packet loss of 10 to the power minus 2. So 100 packets can be lost. Okay, and you can also look at this video call bearer. This is a video over LTE bearer. It allows slightly larger delay, 150 millisecond, but requires for lesser packet drop. Okay. There is this bearer number 3, which looks very aggressive, but I haven't seen any implementation of it. It's for online gaming. It's for real-time online gaming, and this is the most aggressive latency requirement which the LTE standard gives. It requires a 50 millisecond delay. Okay, it's supposed to support online gaming like PUBG or something. But so one should understand that this standards are like a challenge, which the technology, it's not like if you have that standard, then everyone has already implemented it. Then manufacturers or implement people who implement these systems, they would have to implement it to attain this challenge. So as far as I know, this online gaming bearer is not implemented by any service provider in India. Why would they implement it? There's no demand for it. I mean, service provider buy these things, so they haven't bought an equipment which implements this, and it didn't pick up so much, but it is there. This online gaming bearer, it is the most aggressive one for LTE. If you measure the latency for your connection, for your service provider connection, you can expect about a half a second of latency, 500 millisecond latency. That's a typical number you will get. So all these numbers are actually pretty aggressive. And although both Airtel and Jio claim that they have implemented VoLTE, which requires this 100 millisecond latency, I'm not sure if you can verify that, if you can measure this 100 millisecond latency. Okay. All right, so this was an example of the bearer requirements which LTE already has. So this is something which LTE, when you say that your phone is LTE compliant and it supports VoLTE, then it must support a bit pipe with this latency and this packet loss. Okay, there's another part of LTE which is not so well known. It's the cellular V2X part of LTE. So this is supposed to support intelligent transport systems. In fact, the project we are working on is sort of an intelligent transport system where we want to drive a car remotely, right? So when this CV2X is a specific part of LTE, which also has this low latency requirements. So latency requirements for vehicle to infrastructure is about 100 millisecond. That's the worst they have allowed there. And it's not very aggressive. And the message payload is anywhere between 50 to 300 bytes. So from let's say 1/3 of VoIP payload to about twice the VoIP payload. That's the range. And frequency, this is for low frequency messages. It doesn't, this particular part of the standard doesn't include video transmission. Okay. So this messages come at 10 messages per second. Okay. That's not very aggressive, but you want low latency. However, it targets higher speed than what we saw earlier in a small calculation. It targets speed up to 250 km/h. And these numbers, we saw some bearer numbers. The bearer number for these guys are 75, 79. So this standard actually picked up, and this standard was evolved by a collaboration between I think the automobile industry as well as the cellular industry. It picked up and it's further evolving into a 5G standard. Okay, and the latency requirement are now becoming more aggressive. In its 5G avatar, even the video part is included as a part of the standard with a much aggressive latency requirement. Okay, so these were examples of low latency components within the LTE standard. Okay, so this is what the standard says. A service provider, okay, suppose someone, a manufacturer, says that I have implemented a particular bearer in my system, then he or she should guarantee these kind of numbers. Okay, that's what the standard says. Now, what is an LTE system after all? So we know what the standard is requiring, but what is an LTE system? So in the next part of talk, I'll do that. I'll do an overview of LTE latency, and in the process, I'll also describe an LTE system, the components of an LTE system. Many of you may already be familiar with these components, but we'll tell you what we have in the EC department now. So we bought a cell phone a cellular base station. Okay, so there are essentially 3 high-level components of an LTE system. The first is what is called eNode B. By the way, like all industries, communication industry is big on this abbreviations. And don't worry if you lose track. Feel free to ask me. I also lose track all the time. Okay. So this eNode B, sometimes called Node B or this eNode B, this is what you can think of as the base station. It includes an antenna which you put outside and a remote radio head which does radio level processing. Okay, so RRH, remote radio head. It also includes a baseband unit which has the baseband processing. So these 3 components, the antenna, the remote radio head, and this baseband units, are included in a base station. We just call it eNode B. Now, whether they are all in a single box, so each of this unit can be thought of as a computer which does different things. So whether they are in a single box or separate, sorry, antenna is antenna, of course. But the RRH and baseband unit can be thought of as two computers which do two different things. RRH, keep in mind, does the high frequency processing of the radio signal. Okay. For those of you who are from the EC department, this is where the circuits which Gaurav or Vinoy would have developed will come in. The baseband unit is like actually a computer. It sits in a server room. Okay. And it has DSP boards. It can have FPGA, but it doesn't typically have, at least for LTE. Okay. It has DSP boards. It has multi-core machines. That's what this thing will have. Okay. So it's just a fancy computer which does dedicated things, and it will be running a Linux, for example. So this is the one. This is the system that we have. So eNodeB, when you see that big tower that a cell phone provider puts, it has all those components in it. All these three components in it. They may be co-located. They may be a single machine or separate machine, is a different issue. Okay. Now this eNodeB, which is the base station, talks to what is called the packet core, the EPC, Evolved Packet Core. This is like a giant server which has various policies running in it. For instance, if you are a particular user, what kind of bandwidth should be allowed for you? What kind of service have you registered for? And then other policy level decisions, mobility management unit, all that is sitting inside this Evolved Packet Core. This also enables coordination between two different base stations. So just to give you an idea, this Evolved Packet Core can be very expensive. Some service providers may place just one or two in an entire city. Also, it can be very cheap if you have a simple software running it. Like it can run on a very simple server and it doesn't do much. For just as an example, the one we have in the EC department doesn't need to do much. We will not use it to handle a lot of users. We will use it for our experiments. So it's a very simple software running. But for some service provider like Airtel or Jio or Idea or Vodafone, whoever it is, they need to handle a lot of users. So they buy very expensive EPC. I think Airtel has 2 EPC in Bangalore. That's how giant that machine would be. Just 2 of them handling the entire city traffic. Okay, and you will connect all your base stations to them. So that's how the architecture is. Now, the third component of an LTE system is what is sitting in all your, I guess not in your pocket, maybe right now you're at home, but somewhere close to you right now. And it doesn't look like this anymore, but I was missing this one, so I put this picture. I guess now it looks much fancy. So this is your UE, the user equipment. The idea of standardizing is that each of these components we should be able to buy from different manufacturers, and they should all still work with each other. Okay, that's how standards help you. Okay, in fact, the standardization is much more microscopic, and you can buy even multiple subcomponents from different users, and they all work with each other. Just like your phone can be from different companies, and your communication equipment which your service provider had is from some other company, and it talk to each other. Okay. So this is what the hardware looks like. Let's see what is inside all these three components. That's the software part of the LTE stack. So inside the eNodeB is these different layers that we are used to seeing in communication courses. But in fact, what I've drawn inside the eNodeB here is just the PHY and so-called the hi-fi layer. Okay, so low-fi and hi-fi kind of layer. So you can think of the physical layer there, which includes your modulation scheme, channel estimation scheme, and this low-fi and hi-fi. This option, you can see option 8, option 7, option 6. Basically, there is a lot of flexibility on what you put on your remote radio head and what you put in your baseband unit. That's what these different options signify. So for instance, it is possible that you put both your hi-fi and low-fi on the remote radio head and everything above it in your baseband unit. That is also possible. This various splits are possible. Then of course, after that is this MAC, which I guess many of you are aware of what it does. So if you want to associate one operation with it, you can think of scheduling decisions, which the MAC does. Okay. After that, there is this radio link control, and after that, above all this is this radio resource control, which does admission control, who enters, who is schedulable. All those things are abstracted out in that unit for us. Okay, so this is what is inside an eNodeB. All your algorithms that you learn in, let's say, a digital communication course, a networks course, many of them are running here. Okay, as a software on various DSPs and FPGAs. Okay. Now, this evolved packet core is more like a traditional server. Okay. It has various functional units like mobility management. This MME. MME is the mobility management entity, I think. I don't know what E is. Someone can correct. Mobility management. I don't know what E is. Okay. MME. Then there's this packet gateway. PCRF is it controls the pricing, and based on your pricing, it tells you what you can access. All those software components are sitting inside the evolved packet core. User equipment, which you all have, is a much simpler architect, much simpler thing because it has fewer things. It has a PHY and a MAC, but it is harder to manufacture in some sense because because of its form factor, because of how small it is, and essentially it has the same PHY as the as this giant base station, but everything is miniature here, and it doesn't need to handle so many users. That's of course not required, but the PHY is very similar. So the challenge in user equipment is making everything very small. Okay, that's one of the challenges. Okay, so these are the three components. Probably you are all aware of these three components of an LTE system. Okay. So now that we know what an LTE system is, what are the main sources of latency in an LTE system? So here is one very simple thing to keep in mind. The radio resources, the physical frequencies over which transmission happens, are very scarce. You don't want to just give away to anyone who says I am subscribed, can you give me some frequency? So you do many checks and balances before someone comes and starts competing for an actual radio resource. There's a lot of background checks and balances which happens. Okay, so before you come and compete for resources at the MAC level, and so there's a lot of delay that happens in this initial setup. But in this talk, we'll ignore that part of the delay. Okay, this falls into, let's say we'll ignore even the admission control part. What we will focus on is PHY transmission delays, delay while you are waiting in the MAC queue, delay before you get included in the pool of schedulable UEs. This is for the uplink part, that you are a UE and you say you want this resource, but before I take you and make these resources available to you, what is the delay there? And then some interesting implementation delays. Actually, this implementation delay is this. It's a very interesting constraint which we typically which we never keep in mind, especially when doing theory. And the point is, in practice, you have to work with the equipment that will be available. And there are a lot of implementation delays that we have to keep in mind. I'll point out some. Some of them were a bit surprising for us. Okay, so these are the four sources of delay that I'll go one by one over. Okay, so let's start with the PHY transmission delays. So the basic entity, the basic real estate in a cellular system, we'll just say in LTE, is what we can call physical resource blocks. Okay, I'll describe what this physical resource block is. The basic unit of transmission are 15 kilohertz subcarriers, and each subcarrier uses a modulation scheme. Let's say it uses 64 QAM. Let's say what we have. So 64 QAM is 2 to the power 6 bits. Okay, so 6 bits. Sorry, it's 6 bits. So 2 to the power 6 bits. 64 QAM. You can have a max of 2048 such subcarriers, okay, which are then combined using OFDM. So 15 kilohertz subcarriers, 2048 of them. That is what you will have in LTE. So this results in a sampling frequency. By that I mean that this results in a total bandwidth of 30 megahertz. If you multiply this, roughly 30 megahertz. But actually you can't use all these subcarriers. You can only use half of them, 1201. So that comes to about 18 megahertz. This is just multiplication. You can do it. 1201 multiplied with this 15 kilohertz will come down to about 18 megahertz. So that is why in LTE you say that LTE systems have 20 megahertz bandwidth. Okay, it's 15 kilohertz subcarriers. 1201 of them are available. Actually, there are double of them, about not double, but there are 2048 of them. But you never use all of them. You only use about 1200 of them. That's this 20 megahertz bandwidth of LTE. So that's the combined real estate. Now a single resource block comprises 7 symbols. When I say symbols, 7 symbols in time of 12 consecutive subcarriers in frequency. That's a single resource unit that you give a UE or a user. Okay, so 7 symbols of 12 consecutive subcarriers. So this is a resource block, or a physical resource block is the minimum schedulable unit. Okay, so how much time does each unit come after? We can do this calculation very quickly. So there are 7 symbols, 7 into Actually, do you know if I can? I don't know how to show a pointer in this in Keynote. Okay, I'll continue. So, so there are 7 symbols. Each symbol uses this 15 kilohertz subcarrier. 12 of them are in parallel, so that doesn't cost us anything in delay. They will go in parallel. So 1 by 15 is a delay. 1 by 15 kilohertz is a delay for that part. And there is some small gap when some cyclic prefix thing. So we add this 0.005 to it. It comes to about half a millisecond if you add this up. Okay. So the minimum delay at which transmission happens is this half millisecond. Okay. So how much information can you send in this half millisecond? This is, I'm just again describing the schedulable real estate. So one resource block is 6 bits. This is for the 64 POM symbol into 7 because you have 7 symbols into 12 parallel things. So about 504 bits or 63 bytes or 63. So 60 bytes is what you can keep in mind, 60 or 64 bytes. OK, in 20 megahertz, we get 100 such resource blocks. Okay. So because 12, I said 12 carriers. Remember, I said 12 is what you'll take, and there are 1200 such subcarriers available. So about 100 such resource blocks you get in 20 megahertz. That's your entire real estate from which you want to manage all your users. Okay, so this gives about 100 Mbps, bits per second. Okay, Mbps, and so this is the overall support, overall capability of a single LTE base station. Now you can at the same place put multiple of them as well. But this is what a single one will have for a 20 megahertz bandwidth. There are techniques like carrier aggregation which can combine 2 of them. I'm ignoring that for now. In fact, the equipment that we have is has 40 megahertz bandwidth because we combine 2 carriers. OK. So what a scheduler does, a MAC scheduler does, is that every or maybe before that I should get your attention to this figure on the right. So look at this figure on the right. It describes some terms which are used commonly in LTE. So a frame is something which is sort of a basic unit of transmission. It corresponds to 10 millisecond of duration. Every frame comprises 10 subframes, and each frame can be sent. Each subframe can be sent in 1 millisecond, and we can schedule at this 1 millisecond. Sorry, what did I do here? Maybe no, sorry. So each frame is 10 millisecond and it comprises 10 subframes. And in this 1 millisecond, we send this one slot. We can schedule at the level of slot. Slot has 14 OFDM symbols. Remember that we were assigning for each. So there are 14 symbols here. And remember that we were assigning 7 symbols for a UE. Okay, that was half a millisecond of delay. So this is 1 millisecond overall. So you can schedule things at that frequency at 1 millisecond. That's the rate at which you can schedule things. And you can send in units of 63 bytes every half millisecond. But scheduling can happen only after in the units of 1 millisecond. That's what you should keep in mind for now. OK, so this is the basic constraint that we have at the MAC level. OK, there is one more thing. This is for each. We were just thinking of what happens every millisecond, and we said this 10 milliseconds make up a frame. Now, it also matters what configuration you have. There are various configurations possible. So for service providers, which are the leading users of, which is the cellular service providers, they are the main people who implement LTE systems. And for them, what is very important is downlink, sending the data from the base station to the users. That's more important. So they typically go with config 2. If you see this config 2, you see this number 0 to 9. These are the 10 subframes in the frame. And the first one is downlink. Second one is special, then again uplink, then downlink, 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 special, uplink. So there are many more downlinks than uplink, 3 downlinks and 1 uplink. The special is split into half between the two. It's a switching frame. You can think of it that way. But for instance, for our application of remote driving, we will have this vehicle sending video up. OK, and this application requires much more uplink. So we have gone for this config 0, which has many more uplink slots in comparison to downlink slot. So depending on which config you have, the latency can change. Just to take an example, think of the most popular config 2, which almost all systems have. it adds a 5 millisecond delay to the uplink latency after every transmission, because you don't get an uplink slot. Only in this U slot, some cell phone can send something to the tower. In all the D slots, a tower will send something to the cell phone. So that adds that latency, about a 5 millisecond latency. Okay. And also it adds about 1 millisecond latency to downlink after every 2 slots. So after these 3 downlink slots are done, there's a delay of 1 millisecond before you get another downlink chance. So these also add up to that latency. Okay, then third part of the 5-layer latency is error correction. So this CQI stands for channel quality information. Channel quality information in communication, we think of channel quality information as something related to estimate of fade and all that, but everything gets translated to a 4-bit representation or a 5-bit representation in LTE system. So typically it's I think it's a 4-bit representation for LTE. Maybe the latest one is 5-bit. So this is a CQI index. It's a number between 0 and 15. Okay. So a CQI of 10 for downlink represents some channel quality, 15 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. So 1 to 16, you can think of it that way. And for 10, there is a recommended rate of half with 64 QAM. So each of these CQI index are translated to what are called modulation and coding schemes, and that translation is fixed. Okay, and so we can use a code of rate half. This is a reasonable channel quality with 64 QAM. Okay, for this. Along with this, there is a hybrid ARQ. So the CQI is something that you estimate. You think the channel is this good for downlink, and then based on that, you have selected your modulation scheme and coding scheme. But turns out channel is not that good actually. Channel is worse than what you estimated to be. And so you use that, try to use that coding scheme, and the packet didn't reach. Then what do you do? One option is you forget about the first transmission and transmit again. But something smarter is typically done. What you do is you only send in new information incrementally. You still try to make the best use of the first transmission that you have already made. And this kind of scheme is called a hybrid ARQ, HARQ for short. And so there's a separate HARQ queue which is running. And once a packet is in the transmission, once you try to transmit a packet, you just don't throw it away if it fails. You put it on the HARQ queue, and there are several attempts of retransmissions. I think you can have up to 4 retransmissions. And there's also a limit on how many parallel HARQs you can have typically in any implementation. So this adds up to some delays of another 4 to 8 milliseconds. So just to give a rough estimate of what are total delays that we saw till now, where it adds up. So for uplink, data in the units of 30 bytes can be sent roughly about every 10 millisecond. Okay. And for downlink, data in the units of 30 bytes can be sent roughly about every 5 millisecond. That's what this is, very rough calculation, but it just tries to add all the numbers we saw till now. Okay, so this is what phi does. You can just keep that in mind. So main contributor of delay can be HARQ or the config, but this delay can be much lower also for downlink. If you're in good condition, everything is working well. But you can still imagine that about 10 millisecond for uplink and about 5 millisecond for downlink in the units of 60 bytes. Okay, so this was first component of delay. Now let's look at the second component. We'll have a short discussion on this. The delay while you're waiting in the MAC queue. This is basically the scheduling problem, that you want to design a nice scheduler which ensures that everyone gets the delay, that everyone gets satisfied and gets the delay guarantee that they are looking for. Each user equipment UE need not have just one single pipe, this bit pipe or logical channel. It can have about 1 to 3. So you can imagine a regular default bearer along with a VoLTE, which is a voice over LTE pipe that you have established. So there are 2 parallel channels that your UE has, that your UE wants to support. And these 2 parallel channels may have different latency requirements, different QoS requirements, quality of service requirements. Okay, and the role of a MAC is to assign resource blocks to different logical channels, keeping in mind the QoS requirement, this is the demand, and the channel quality information, this is the state. Okay, keeping in mind those 2 things, it has to assign. It gets access to other information. For instance, it gets access to the head of the line delay for the MAC queue. For downlink, the MAC scheduler is running there as well. The queue itself is also there, so it can directly access it. For uplink, this comes through what are called measurement reports, which are sent by the UE. Okay, and it has things like this head of the line delay. So you can use all those information. But it's interesting to keep in mind that there'll be a delay if you try to get some information from the UE. Okay, there's an interesting problem which somehow we discovered after a lot of discussion. Once you assign multiple resource block to a UE, they get combined to form a single transport block. Now, one constraint is that you can only send one transport block per antenna. So if you have a single antenna system, okay, and you want to support a low latency and a regular latency application, there is no way, because in the end everything will be combined into a single transport block. Well, no way is an overstatement, but there's a huge constraint. Everything will become a single transport block. So you take this resource block, combine them into a single packet, which we are calling this transport block, and you can send only one transport block per antenna. Well, you can get around this by using two different antennas and associating both antennas with different flows. That's one way to get around, or use multiple antennas and associate them with different flows. That's one way to get around it, but it's a very interesting constraint to keep in mind. And in spite of all we know about schedulers, and this is not just a problem of implementation, but also theory. Parimal can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong here. So what we understand is that most implementation and even most theory gives best effort kind of guarantee, that on average you will see this kind of behavior, but they are not deterministic guarantee of latency. Okay, there are very few works which give that kind of guarantee, and definitely there are maybe some rare implementations of cellular system which give that kind of guarantee. Okay. Okay, so this was the MAC problem. This was the scheduler problem part. So summary. So this delay which the MAC contributes depend on what kind of schedulers you have implemented, and this is where a lot of IP is. Great scheduler. I mean, you would, if you go to a local cheap vendor, then you will get one kind of scheduler. If you go to a fancy company, you will get a fancy scheduler, and that's where a large part of IP is. Okay, but it looks like LTE actually the implementations are still they never moved beyond best effort as it was supposed to. It looks like implementations are quite basic from little survey that we were doing, but it obviously has potential to do much more. Okay, so next part of the delay is delay before UE gets included in a pool of schedulable UEs. So MAC already has a pool of UEs it's trying to satisfy. But even before I take you as a part of that pool, there are some checks and balances I have to do. I would like to highlight some delay in that part. So this is for the uplink part. So a UE, a cell phone, makes a scheduling request to the eNode B. And then what happens is that eNode B lets the UE know the address of 3 resource blocks where it can send its buffer status report. So it tells you, okay, why don't you tell me a little bit more about yourself? What is the current number of packets that are waiting at your end? What throughput do you require? All those things. Let's say you send me a little bit more about it at this frequency in this location. Okay, that's what this address of 3 PRBs is, and it sends a buffer status report. This is just like a state of the UE which it's trying to report to the center. And in fact, this 3 PRBs is a lot of bits. If UE has to send very little data, it can just send it here in this 3 PRBs. Okay, that's allowed. But if you want more resources, then you get more assigned to you, just like we discussed earlier. Okay, and there is a delay in this entire process of sending and then figuring out. First and foremost, the scheduling request can be sent at fixed frequency based on the implementation. It can be every millisecond, every 2 millisecond, every 5 millisecond. So these are the possibilities actually, what I've listed here: 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 40, 80. Then getting this address of PRBs for the buffer status report and then location for the next one adds to a few milliseconds of delay further. And in fact, if you don't like this fixed frequency scheduling policy where every time you have to tell that I need more resources, it is possible that you would like to get assigned a fixed amount of resource for the next half a second. Okay, this is what is called semi-persistent scheduling, SPS. That I will not tell you every time I have to transmit. Once I make a request, you give me for next 100 millisecond, 150 millisecond, keep me in the pool for that much time. That's what SPS does. It shaves off this extra delay of checking every time and giving me that PRB location. It shaves off that delay. Okay, so this delay in this part can be anything from 2 to 10 millisecond, depending on the active number of users and whether or not you're using semi-persistent scheduling or not. Okay, that's another source of delay. So another 2 to 10 millisecond coming in this part. Okay, finally, some implementation delays. So there are two sources of implementation delay I would like to point out. So these implementations of different logical channels in different layers are very complicated, and they are done using parallel programming. Multiple parts of the channel are running on parallel threads. And rather than doing something very fancy, a typical implementation will sync these threads at fixed frequency of 1 millisecond. Okay, there's a clock ticking, and at that point, I'll transfer packet from the previous one to the next one. So for each such layer, it will add this 1 millisecond delay. So to have a packet in your Mac queue now, you should be ready for it in the previous clock itself. Okay, so this 1 millisecond adds several times. This add to about 5 to 10 milliseconds of delay. This is an implementation delay. Of course, you can do fancier implementation of these multi-thread programming, but this is the typical one that people will go with. So there's another 5 to 10 millisecond of delay because of just this implementation. And another interesting constraint, it's not a delay constraint, but it's a constraint which you have to keep in mind when you're implementing your scheduler, which may translate into a latency constraint. There is a limit on the number of UEs you can schedule per TTI, because depending on the implementation, supporting each UE takes some computational effort. And so any implementation will have a limitation on the number of UEs that are schedulable per TTI. The one we have can only schedule 4 UEs per TTI. I have seen implementations with 8, 16, up to 16 UEs per TTI, but there's always this limit, the number of UEs. Of course, there's no fundamental reason to have this. This is how things have been implemented in practice. Okay, and therefore the scheduler is not something which will determine implementation. The implementation should determine the scheduler. So when you're designing a scheduler, which we have to keep all these things in mind. Okay, so that basically adds up. That concludes this part of the talk. So here are these 4 parts: 5 transmissions, 10 millisecond uplink, about 5 millisecond delay for 60 byte. It can be lower. Mac, well, depends on the delays here depend on how good your implementation is. Okay, who do you prefer? What kind of traffic you prefer? For instance, if you just have a single UE to support and you have a complete base station for it, there's no extra delay. Okay, from Mac side. And then this delay before you get become schedulable after you send the scheduling request is about 2 to 10 milliseconds, and then there can be other implementation delays of about 5 to 10 milliseconds. Okay, so the verdict, basically the base delay for transmission is 15 to 20 millisecond in LTE, and we have verified this delay for the equipment that we have. That's what you can measure actually. This is for transmission. Just you send a packet and it gets received at the base station or downlink. Downlink can be much lower, but you keep in mind this 15 to 20 millisecond of delay in LTE. Okay, so some conclusions on LTE. LTE can target application requiring 100 to 150 millisecond end-to-end latency, which you can build upon using this minimum latency for uplink, which is about 15 to 20 millisecond. And for downlink, it can be anything like 1 to 5 millisecond. Okay, so some comments on schedulers, because that's what we have been thinking about. LTE gives a lot of flexibility to implement different kind of schedulers. Okay. However, looks like the implementation is not so easy. It's very challenging. Most implementations are simple and best effort. But I believe that LTE has a lot more potential, and many more things can be done with it. However, we are moving to 5G, looks like. So that's what we'll do in this talk as well. So let me try to point out how things are changing in 5G. Okay. So what has changed? First and foremost, you have to add many more terminology things. Okay, that's you have to do. Otherwise, it will not look very cool. So we'll do that. So instead of E node B, we'll call it G node B now. And instead of this RRU, RRH and BBU, remote radio head and baseband unit, we'll call it G node B CU, GNB CU, and GNB DU. Okay. That's first thing we did. Terminology change. Okay, that's not so exciting. What else does 5G do? One of the more exciting thing 5G is trying to do is network function virtualization. I don't understand it so well, but I'll try to tell. And CNI actually this is one of the major threats in CNI activities. Uh, Roughly, what it's trying to do is it's trying to ensure this QoS guarantee, keeping in mind different resources available at different places, and somehow combine them to enable a network function. Okay, so think of this scheduler as a network function. If you think of it as a fixed resource thing that limits things like the number of UEs you can schedule per TTI. But if it is a virtual function which you can enable by combining a large set of resources in a cloud, then these limitations will disappear. But it requires a lot of software and hardware innovations, and that's what this network function virtualization is going towards, an end-to-end uh, orchestration of resources, including radio as well as computational resources. Okay. Third thing, so we saw that in LTE, bearers are the final QoS guaranteed pipelines. Okay, and they get associated with the UE. In 5G, they are being replaced with flows. Okay, flow is like a bearer. It's like a bit pipe with guarantee of QoS, but it's not associated with a UE. It's associated with that QoS, that quality of service, and all multiple UEs can participate in it. Okay. So this notion of bearer will be now flow, and multiple users can participate in that flow. And you can enable a low latency flow. And if you have a low latency application, you get a share in that flow. Okay. And there are many changes to MAC and PHY. So for instance, instead of 64 QAM, you are going to much more efficient modulation schemes. Okay. I think 1024 QAM is in. Then massive MIMO. NOMA is also included in the 5G standard. Actually, some components of NOMA were already there in LT parts of LTE standard. I did not comment on that, but yeah, but in 5G, NOMA is supposed to be included. I'm not sure if it's already in. Perhaps it's already in. And then millimeter wave, right? So yeah, I will not comment on this part, but these are the 5-layer innovations which are entering 5G. But what about latency? How can 5G enable latency requirement? First and foremost, my belief. So we somehow tend to think that for LTE was supposed to do something latency and 5G goes beyond that. That is not correct perception. These standards go hand in hand. Whatever latency problems I was trying to highlight in LTE were not solved during the LTE time. And for 5G, you have to solve all of them. They require many innovations. You have to write fancy schedulers and all those things. So using LTE level setup itself to give great QoS guarantee is still an interesting problem. And even though 5G will come, you can implement that in the 5G setup. But it is still an interesting problem. None of those problems were really solved. Okay. And during this COVID times, we saw many instances of those problems not being solved. I'm guessing that all of you are not completely satisfied with the video transmission quality you were getting and all the Skype calls quality you were getting. So that's a problem with LTE, right? And it needs to be solved. But the key thrust in 5G, which is completely new, is the focus on sub-millisecond latency. Okay, and for data which comes once in a while. So remember that 1 millisecond was the basic unit of transmission in LTE, but 5G wants to target something lower than that. So how do we make something? How do we go for something lower than that? Remember that in the latency calculation of that half millisecond that we did for a resource block, this 15 kilohertz subcarrier was a part of it. But 5G allows more than 15 kilohertz subcarrier. It allows for 30 kilohertz, 60 kilohertz, and 120 kilohertz subcarrier. Okay, so therefore it allows for shorter symbol duration, and more symbols per slot. Also, there's a scalable slot duration. This is one part of 5G standard. More importantly, slots are not basic units of transmission. Okay, you have this. You are allowed to transmit in a smaller unit. This part of the standard is not frozen yet, but this seems to be like there's a wide agreement on this. This will come. So mini slots are allowed, which comprise either 2, 4, or 7 symbols. So 7 symbols we already saw in a resource block. So this mini slot can be 2, 4, or 7 symbols. So you can even send 2 symbols separately. And this is the fourth part of the innovation is something very interesting. So we are allowed to snatch resources which are already committed to something. So EMBB stands for regular mobile data. Suppose you have given a resource block to the mobile data. Now a very low latency requirement comes. This is supposed to send a critical message for remote surgery or something like that. You don't have to imagine something so fancy. You can imagine remote driving also if you like. Okay. Then what you can do is you can take a part of that resource block assigned to this EMBB user and assign to URLLC traffic, and let this user know in the hindsight that actually this resource which I gave you, I wrote it off to someone else. You can tell it later. Okay. There are two possibilities. This user can actually think of this part of the resource as lost, and this is the puncturing view. Or you can think of superposition coding ideas where both the transmission here took in to account both the transmissions, that one URLC UE will get this part of the resource and one EMBB user will get this part of the resource. So this is a very interesting thing, and this will open up many new scheduling challenges, scheduler design challenges. Okay. And then there is this uplink grant free access. Basically, it's a random access channel which is available for uplink transmission. You can just transmit over this. That's also allowed. So these are 5 innovations which I felt will push the low latency boundary in 5G. But again, I will reiterate the point that this is going beyond the problems that we saw. Even the problems that we saw are very interesting and they have to be solved first. Before you get sub-millisecond latency, why don't we first get sub 5 millisecond latency? Okay, that's one thing I want you to keep in mind. Okay, so this is I'll conclude here. So LTE can offer end-to-end latency of about 100 millisecond. Okay, that's a reasonable number. End-to-end. That's where, let's say, VoLTE asks for that. And although there are bearers which ask for 50 millisecond, but it's difficult to implement those bearers, I think. I mean, you can do some things. We are trying to do something. If you have limited number of users, you can do many things. Several applications such as remote driving can be developed using this 50 to 100 millisecond latency as well. Okay, that's another important point. It's not like all of us are doing remote surgeries. So first, let's develop applications which require 50 millisecond. And if you want to do it in ISC, we have equipment to do that. So that's another point. 5G will offer drastic improvements over this latency. Okay, so one can expect end-to-end latency of even 5 millisecond or lower, but it will not come for free. Okay, it will require many innovations. First, careful parallel implementation of this G-Node B is required. A typical implementation of G-Node B will not have a low latency guarantee. Okay, it is very difficult to do that. You have to keep it's quite airtight actually. We just saw the calculations, how quickly you add milliseconds. Just because you synchronize multiple threads, that adds milliseconds, about tenths of milliseconds. So it is to the extent that when you are programming these things, you have to keep in mind how latency will add up. Joint EMBB and URLC schedulers. This will, I think, be a very important thread to enable that ultra low latency. And I think it will also require innovative admission control to figure out whom to consider for competing on those radio resources. Right. So with this I'll end. So in summary, there is a great engineering innovation which is coming for us. And if you are like me, as in if you want to develop algorithms by using cutting edge engineering innovations, this is the time. There are many nice things we can do with it. And we already have some part of this equipment at the CNI or in other parts of ISC. So feel free to take use of that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your talk. So the floor is now open for questions. You can unmute yourself and ask a question if anyone has a question now.
Hello, Himanshu.
Yeah.
This is Vijay here. So how do they handle packet drops? Is it purely through hybrid ARQ?
At the MAC level?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the MAC level, HARC is the only thing for retransmission, as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. MAC. So HARC has separate queues, and they're a little bit more delicate. So for example, the scheduler that we have, we are not touching the HARC queues. We are keeping them separately. We were using all the other resources. So we are writing off a part of our resources for just HARC.
Right. Thank you.
Professor Himanshu, this is Preetham here. Do these latencies also depend on the size of the cell, and are these fixed or by the standard, or like for example the new low mobility large cell proposal at the ITU? Increased cell size, will it affect the latency, that slot size in the 5G?
So I'm not on top of that, but maybe Nilesh can comment on it. But I'll imagine that they would have fixed for larger cell size. They would have, because larger cell size would determine some channel quality, and that in turn will determine the coding rate that you can use. So I am guessing that of course it will depend on that, and maybe larger cell your latency would be pretty high. But maybe Nilesh can comment on them if he knows, but he doesn't have to. Sorry, I shouldn't drag him into this. But yeah, I'm not aware of it.
Hi, Nilesh here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I have a very high latency BSNL connection. Sorry. My understanding is if the cell size increases, your delay spreads increase, which means one of the tricks that you do, which is shrink the slot size and your cyclic prefix, that trick can't be pulled off for very large cell sizes. So that's one drawback of a very large cell size. Thanks.
Right. So we just added this very small 0.005 for that part, and yeah, those tricks will not be. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So they have different carrier spacing maybe there. Okay. Preetham, does that answer your question in part at least?
Yeah, of course. So what is the current cell size standard?
I don't know that at all. Yeah. So my focus was mainly on standard related to this implementation of eNodeB. I'm not aware of cell size part of the standard. So I think this will fall more in the category of private LTE or something like that, because we are completely designing this. Nilesh, please go ahead.
So I had a question. You had mentioned that there is work going on NFV at CNI. Do you know what's going on? Just curious.
The work which is going on right now is to figure out what to do, but we are trying to come up with a description of an experiment which will capture at least one or two key elements of the of NFV, and we want to involve our LTE equipment as well as the Wi-Fi equipment that Cisco has provided. So maybe Preetham can comment on this a little bit. Preetham is actually leading that effort with SVR Anand.
Yeah, so we are still in early stages of development or discussions to determine what target we should set. But essentially, we are looking at how we can coordinate or orchestrate amongst the Wi-Fi, wired, SDN, and NFV part of the cellular, to see if we can provide dedicated slices with some specific QoS categories or guarantees, if we can provide the guarantees at all, or at least have some differentiated qualities with slices.
Thanks.
But the goal, Nilesh, for instance, would be to support an application like remote driving and create a slice for it when the demand comes and make it available to the application. But slice should include various components, not only just cellular components.
If I can ask one more follow-up question, I know there's a lot of activity now, or at least excitement that there's this mobile edge computing they're talking about, where you pretty much take your hard, heavy-duty compute tasks and dump it off at the edge of the network. Is that part of this whole exercise or not yet?
Yes, we want to. Okay, here is my take on this. This is very elementary. If you don't include compute, resources like this or cloud resources, then NFV perhaps may not be so exciting because many of these things were still around. Then it's just a standard age-old SDN idea. But bringing compute along with us as a part of these resources is what makes NFV so exciting. And so we would like to include compute as a part of this. So this compute can be edge compute or maybe cloud compute for more vanilla implementation. At the moment, the reason we are hesitant about the edge compute part is because we are not really aware of what kind of compute our access point will expose. Okay. So, but it is something on the cards. We'll try to do that kind of thing, that when you ask for a slice, it includes some edge computational resource. That's an important thing. I think we have to understand that part.
Yeah, just to add to what Professor Himanshu said. So I think the conventional notion of slicing included compute also at any part of the network. And the only question, I don't know whether the NFV has included compute as a resource, but some concrete use cases, if they're there, then definitely we can look at it in a much more focused way.
So one specific framework that Nilesh, we are using is for the LTE part at least, is this thing called FlexRAN, which and we can do some small experiments like switching the MAC online with it. Okay, switching the having multiple schedulers and switch with it. There's a small those kind of experiments we can do in software right now, not of course in the hardware that we have. Those things are already something we can try. Okay, we move on to next question.
Himanshu, Nitin here. So let's say we have a Wi-Fi system. Assume that there are no other interference. You have the entire air, the radio frequency to yourself. Then what kind of latencies can we expect in a Wi-Fi system?
Okay, so this is a question which we studied for it's a very good question. We studied this quite thoroughly. So the bottleneck of latency. So firstly, the basic transmission latency of Wi-Fi is 2 to 5 milliseconds. Okay, and this is in the good condition when there's nothing else competing, when you can support. That's the baseline. But Wi-Fi behaves erratically, and the bottleneck is typically during handover. Okay, so when you do handover, then the latency of Wi-Fi can be very high because it goes around, scans for the next one to attach to. You can write up all those things. You can have a very nicely managed system and improve it, but it's difficult to get the worst case Wi-Fi latency to be below 100 milliseconds.
Okay.
Worst
and,
case. This is during handover basically. That's one thing. And this we'll also maybe, because Nilesh has put up a question about Wi-Fi 6. So Wi-Fi 6 will promise to get around this bottleneck because it is essentially LTE. It allows you to do all the central orchestration. And indeed, Nilesh, we are trying to procure Wi-Fi 6 equipment. Maybe Preetham can comment more on it. What is the status of plan on Wi-Fi 6 for the center?
Hopefully we should get it in a month's time, if everything goes according to plans.
So we are not very clear about what kind of flexibility we'll have in implementing our own policies and schedulers, but at least the equipment will be there. So Wi-Fi 6, which is basically LTE implemented on Wi-Fi, in the sense it gives a similar kind of flexibility, will get rid of some of these problems. Nitin, to answer your question.
Thanks.
But 100 millisecond, what? It will be very challenging to go below 100 millisecond unless you innovate. So one innovation we are trying to do is something like a smart handoff, where you try to preemptively understand where you are and make a handoff without actually searching for the next best access point. Things can be done. I think there is still a bottleneck of about 15 to 20 millisecond. I don't remember. Just executing the roam command itself has some 15 to 20 millisecond latency.
So this is Nishchal here. What about operator switching in these systems? I'm not completely sure of these systems, but what about operator switching? Suppose I have a Jio network and someone else has an Airtel network. Then are these latency? Will there be any effect on latency in these things, or?
No, so yeah, so when I was talking of latency, I was not including those kind of scenarios. It was after you are, if you saw the rough calculations I was giving, you were already at the gate of MAC, and then we were looking at what are the latencies after that. Of course, in a real city-wide implementation with multiple operators, so EPC will have to resolve these kind of things, and it can create large latencies. But we are imagining applications like remote driving where I feel that there are two scenarios possible. One is that you have your own communication infrastructure, your own base station and your own policy to support a small campus. This is the private LTE idea, which is also picking up. Or maybe there are much more expensive plans where a part of the spectrum is written off to you in the sense that essentially you have guaranteed access to some part of it. So those are the scenarios. I don't think you can support latency critical applications in wild like this, at least at this point. Okay, so but I don't know exact number of operators switching latency. This I have no clue about this. But you can actually do a ping on your Airtel phone and try to see the end-to-end latency for that. It can be pretty large, by the way. So if you see end-to-end, complete end-to-end. So I'm in touch with a company called Cloud Physician, which does remote ICU setups, and they do it over regular open network, and they use some cell phone cards, or they use some cell phone connection for it. They get latencies anywhere between 1 to 3 seconds. So in many applications, you'll be okay with that, by the way. You can buffer and you can do all that. 1 through 3 seconds is not such a crazy latency. You don't have an application like remote driving where you have to apply brakes or something like that. I hope I answered your question a little bit. I don't know so much about that question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Professor Himanshu, Krishna Chaitanya here.
Yes.
How does 802.11p sit in this whole
very good.
set of standards?
I'm glad you asked one of the few things that I know a little bit about. Okay, so we do have an 11p module. So 11p never took off. 11p is the Wi-Fi counterpart of CV2X, so to say. Okay, so you should imagine that Wi-Fi and LTE are two competing groups. So LTE has the CV2X, cellular V2X. Wi-Fi has DSRC, dedicated short range communication. It's short range because it's short range compared to cellular communication. But it's for Wi-Fi, it's actually long range. That's where 11p sits. It's a Wi-Fi standard which will communicate to up to, I think, half a kilometer to a kilometer. And 11p can have very low latency. It can have 1 to 2 millisecond latency, but it doesn't have association. It has broadcast. So there's a roadside unit and there's an onboard unit. And roadside unit is screaming a message, okay, which every onboard unit can hear. So we were thinking that this can serve very well to send control packets over redundant paths, just like a telemetry link. Telemetry link is what you use to control, let's say, a drone, a remote control kind of thing. So it can be used for redundant path, this 11p. And we do have 11p development kits, which 11p never took off as such in India, but incidentally, CDAC, I think, implemented it for something, and we were able to get those units. So we have a dev kit of 11p, and we have done basic latency measurements. It's sub 2 milliseconds, but packets are very short, and there's no association. So you have to make a proprietary protocol to enable transmission. Aditya Gopalan was working on that. I'm not sure if Aditya is here, but yeah, he can add something to it. I don't think he's here. Okay, yeah. Does that answer your question in part?
Yes, sir, it does. Yes. Thank you, sir. Are there any more questions? Okay. If there are no more questions, then let's thank Professor Himanshu for his talk today. Network seminar won't hold a talk on 21st July because there is a SPCOM. So we'll have a talk on 28th July. An announcement will come in broadcast mail soon. We welcome you to come back to the talk then, and also encourage some of you to present regularly in the network seminar. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this ends the meeting. Thank you.